Welcome back. This is Chicken Philosophy, Teilhard de Chardin, part 23.
This is Network 23.
We don't always do the max headroom when 23 is mentioned here on Chicken Philosophy. But we do sometimes. I know I think people who are, and now I'm what you call a Xennial, on the border, mostly Gen X. I mean, I identify as Gen X. 1978, that's objectively Gen X, but it's also objectively like the very tail end of Gen X. So when you're kind of like end of Gen X, beginning of millennial, they call that a Xennial. So I think people who are proper millennials will tend to think of that Jim Carrey horror movie where he had shit written all over his body when they hear 23. But I, in the Gen X-iness of me, think of max headroom. So today is going to be, oh, by the way, happy Ganesh Chaturthi. And sorry for my pronunciation. Editor Edward, can we get a close-up of these three, please? Thank you. Believe it or not, those aren't my only Ganeshas. There's two more. They're over there. Anyway, so today is going to be mid-80s cyberpunk and Ganesh themed with we're on the Hindu cyberpunk end of the spectrum of mystical visionary Christianity. Specifically, I mean, it kind of fits because at least in the umbrella theme that we're exploring, the impetus, the original impetus behind the interest in Teilhard de Chardin was the overlap between his predictions, his outlook and his philosophy, and the development of the internet. And I've talked about that before. You can hear me talk about that in especially part 1 of the Teilhard de Chardin show on Chicken Philosophy. If you'd like to start at part 1 or anywhere between 1 and 23, or if you're in the future from my perspective, after 23, you can click there. That's the playlist. So today, we're going to pick up where we left off last time, which means we're in part 3 of the Divine Milieu. Part 3 is called the Divine Milieu. And the subcategory of the Divine Milieu is part 3. The growth of the Divine Milieu, B. So it's 3-3-B. Divine Milieu, 3-3-B. Divine Milieu, the growth of the Divine Milieu. And the B is entitled Individual Progress in the Divine Milieu. And Purity, Faith, and Fidelity, the operatives. Just jump right in, shall I? Ego operor, 3 dots, pater semper operator. Editor Edward, would you translate that for us? So this is one of those ones where, according to Google, it's something Teilhard de Chardin said in the Divine Milieu. So looking at Latin translations and stuff, it seems to be I work, ... Father always work. Father always works. I work, Father always works. So my work is always the work of the Father, something like that. Thank you, Editor Edward. The delight of the Divine Milieu, parentheses, heavy with responsibilities, and parentheses, is that it can assume an ever-increasing intensity around us. One could say that it is an atmosphere ever more luminous and ever more charged with God. Electric. It is in him, and in him alone, that the reckless vow of all love is released. I love it when that happens. To lose oneself in what one loves, to sink oneself in it more and more. It could be said that three virtues contribute with particular effectiveness towards the limitless concentration of the divine in our lives: purity, faith, and fidelity. Three virtues which appear to be, quote, static, end quote, but which are in fact the three most active and unconfined virtues of all. Let us look at them, one after the other, and examine their generative function in the divine milieu. Lowercase italic Roman numeral 1, purity. So, the divine milieu, 3, 3, B, 1. Purity, in the wide sense of the word, is not merely abstaining from wrong. Parentheses, that is only a negative aspect of purity. End parentheses, nor even chastity. Parentheses, which is only a remarkable special instance of it. End parentheses. It is the rectitude and the impulse introduced into our lives by the love of God, sought in and above everything. He is spiritually impure, who, lingering in pleasure or shut up in selfishness, introduces within himself and around himself a principle of slowing down and division in the unification of the universe in God. He is pure, on the other hand, who, in accord with his place in the world, seeks to give Christ's desire to consummate all things precedence over his own immediate and momentary advantage. Is it just me, or is there a lot of very suggestive still purer and more pure is he who, attracted by God, succeeds in giving that movement and impulse of Christ's an ever greater continuity, intensity, and reality, whether his vocation calls him to move always in the material zones of the world, parentheses, though more and more spiritually, end parentheses, or whether, as is more often the case, he has access to regions where the divine gradually replaces for him all other earthly nourishment. Thus understood, the purity of beings is measured by the degree of the attraction that draws them towards the divine center, or what comes to the same thing by their proximity to the center. Christian experience teaches us that it is preserved by recollection, mental prayer, purity of conscience, purity of intention, and the sacraments. Let us be satisfied here with extolling its wonderful power of condensing the divine in all around us. In one of his stories, Robert Hugh Benson tells of a, quote, visionary, end quote, coming on a lonely chapel where a nun is praying. He enters. All at once, he sees the whole world bound up and moving and organizing itself around that out-of-the-way spot, in tune with the intensity and inflection of the desires of that puny, praying figure. The convent chapel had become the axis about which the earth revolved, the contemplative, sensitized, and animated all things, because she believed, and her faith was operative, because her very pure soul placed her near to God. This piece of fiction is an admirable parable. The inward tension of the mind towards God may seem negligible to those who try to calculate the quantity of energy accumulated in the mass of humanity. And yet, if we could see the, quote, light invisible, end quote, as we can see clouds or lightning or the rays of the sun, a pure soul would seem as active in this world by virtue of its sheer purity as the snowy summits whose impassable peaks breathe in continually for us the roving powers of the high atmosphere. If we want the divine milieu to grow all around us, then we must jealously guard and nourish all the forces of union, of desire, and of prayer that grace offers us by the mere fact that our transparency will increase the divine light that never ceases to press in upon us, will erupt the more powerfully. Have we ever thought of the meaning of the mystery of the Annunciation? I used to know this when I was going through my Catholic phase back in my 20s. That was in the aughts. Editor Edward, could you remind us what the Annunciation is? The Annunciation is when the archangel Givriel, or Gavriel, or Gabriel, you might know him by that anglicized version of the Latinized version of... Anyway, so it's when he showed up and told Mary, hey, guess what? Something crazy is going to happen. You're going to have a baby. Let's get some art for that, depicting that. All right. Thank you, Editor Edward. When the time had come when God resolved to realize his incarnation before our eyes, he had first of all to raise up in the world a virtue capable of drawing him as far as ourselves. He needed a mother who would engender him. Oh, by the way, happy feast day? Is it a feast day? Yesterday was the Blessed Mother Day. It was a big deal here in Goa. Anyway, the 7th of September that was. All right, he needed a mother who would engender him in the human sphere. What did he do? He created the Virgin Mary. That is to say, he called forth on earth a purity so great that within this transparency, he would concentrate himself to the point of appearing as a child. There, expressed in its strength and reality, is the power of purity to bring the divine to birth among us. And yet the Church, addressing the Virgin Mother, adds, Beata que credidisti. Editor Edward, could you translate that? And blessed is she that believed. Thank you. For it is in faith that purity finds the fulfillment of its fertility. 2. That's lowercase italics, Roman numeral 2. 33b2. Faith, as we understand it here, is not, of course, simply the intellectual adherence to Christian dogma. It is taken in a much richer sense to mean belief in God charged with all the trust in his beneficent strength that the knowledge of the divine being arouses in us. It means the practical conviction that the universe, between the hands of the Creator, still continues to be the clay in which he shapes innumerable possibilities according to his will. In a word, it is evangelical faith. Sidebar, for those coming from the outside a little bit curious about why the fuck is the same guy that I know dresses up as all these different versions of himself and talks about all this stuff and all these ways. Why is he talking about this? For those folks, not the I want to hear about Teilhard de Chardin, even if it's from this blaspheming heretic. That's a different crowd. And hello, thank you, you're welcome here. Everybody's welcome here. Evangelical means relating to, like, Jesus said, go out and make converts. In one or two of the Gospels, I don't remember the exact passages. And so the whole thing about going and telling everybody, hey, he died, he has risen, he will come again, or whatever. That is evangelical. So that is a phenomenon that obviously Paul did. It's the origin of the church. If nobody had done that, there would be no Christianity. So that's kind of like you could say the lowercase, although, you know what I mean? Like it's the meaning of the word. Now, in present day, especially if you're in America, but pretty much the dominating in the zeitgeist or whatever of the modern human, evangelical refers to the movement in the United States of America, which is tied to right-wing politics and Christian nationalism, or Christo-fascism, as it's accurately called. So those are two different things, two different definitions. People shit on words all the time. You know this. ISIS used to be a goddess before it was a terrorist organization. Golden Dawn used to be a system of magic before it was the Greek Nazis. I know you're Hellenic purists, not Nazis. There's a difference. I know. We're not National Socialists. We just want to kill everybody who's not Greek in Greece. You're Nazis. That's how the word Nazi is used to describe a group of people. If you're fascist and you're into like racial purity of the nation, like you want all those immigrants to get the fuck out. That's the definition of that. I mean, in a general sense, that's another word that, the National Socialist Party of Germany, it changed when it became, in the mid-30s, it started to go a particular direction. I mean, before that, but anyway. Then it had a specific definition. Now it has a general definition and a specific definition. But the general definition exists regardless of whether you match the specific definition. So it's really kind of like I'm not this. Technically it's like disingenuous. It's intentionally fucking with words and using semantics to try to weasel your way out of being accurately described. Golden Dawn Party in Greece. And anyone else anyway, the point is, Words. Yeah, evangelical. American evangelism is different from evangelical in the way that Teilhard de Chardin is using it right now, is the point. Yes, where were we? It is evangelical faith, of which it can be said that no virtue, not even charity, was more strongly urged by the Savior. Now, under what guise was this disposition so untiringly revealed to us by the words and deeds of the Master? Above all and beyond all, as an operative power, but intimidated by the assertions of an unproven positivism, or, quote, put off, end quote, by the mystical excesses of Christian Science, the capital C, capital S. Are we talking about Mary Baker Eddy and I assume, yeah, okay. We are sometimes tempted to gloss over the disconcerting promise that the efficacy of prayer is tangible and certain. Yet maybe that's a reference to how they're like, if you believe hard enough, then, your cancer will go away if you pray for it. But if you pray to be healed of your cancer and then you die of cancer, it's because your faith wasn't strong enough. That's the Christian Scientist thing. I don't know if they still do that, or if or maybe anyway, it's been a while since I looked in their direction. Yet we cannot ignore it without blushing for Christ. All right, now we're back on track. Enough with the Nazis and Christian Scientists. Let's get back to the sexual innuendo in this Catholic priest's words. If we do not believe, the waves engulf us, the winds blow, nourishment fails, sickness lays us low or kills us. The divine power is impotent or remote. If, on the other hand, we believe, the waters are welcoming and sweet, the bread is multiplied, our eyes open, the dead rise again, the power of God is, as it were, drawn from him by force and spreads throughout all nature. One must either arbitrarily minimalize or explain away the gospel, or one must admit the reality of these effects not as transient and past, but as perennial and true at this moment. Speaking of this moment, do I have eyes on the thing? Yes, I do. I just thought it would be fun to hold this up right now. Okay, where was I? I don't know. I need the magnifying glass. Yes. Let us beware of stifling this revelation of a possible vitalization of the forces of nature in God. Let us rather place it resolutely at the center of our vision of the world, careful only that we understand it aright. Aright? Aright. When we say that faith is, quote, operative, end quote, what do we mean? Is divine action at the call of faith going to replace the normal interplay of the causes which surround us? Do we, like the, quote, Illuminati? I just love that he uses that word. It's like, what the fuck way is he using that word? There's like 4 definitions, none of which really fit with what he's talking about. End quote. Expect God to bring about directly upon matter or upon our bodies results that have hitherto been obtained by our own industrious research? Is he referring to the old Bavarian cult or whatever? Obviously not. Neither the internal interrelations of the material or psychical world nor man's duty to make the greatest possible effort are in any way undermined or even relaxed by the precepts of faith. Iota unum aut unus apex non Praeteribit. Editor Edward, would you? He's quoting Matthew chapter 5, verse 18. I'll just read the whole verse. It's, "For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished." Thank you, Editor Edward. Unus. Uranus is a planet and an undersea god. You see, have I gone off about this? You see, the ancients looked up at that little light in the sky and said, that's Saturn. And that's Jupiter. That one's Mars. That's Venus. That's Mercury. And the sun and the moon, right? And then like 16 minutes ago, people were looking through these powerful binoculars and going, oh, there's another one. There's a fucking another one. What should we call that one? Well, let's call it George. King George, I think, would really appreciate that. And they were like, yeah, okay, we'll call that one George. And then someone came along and said, no, we can't call it George. All the planets are named after, gods. Because the planets are the gods. Originally, there's no difference. The stories about the gods are stories that were made up after that had that name. Like the stories are about that. That is what the story is about. Is the story. When you talk about Saturn, his character is defined by the fact that Saturn, of all the visible planets, moves the most slowly, right? Whereas Uranus was some nerdy astronomer like, let's have a meeting of the astronomers. We were thinking we should give it like a god's name, because you know how the planets are also gods? Oh yeah. What should we call it? We'll call that one Uranus. Uranus was the fucking sky. Uranus and Gaia. I think Uranus was a Titan, right? Uranus and Gaia. Gaia was the earth, Uranus was the sky. And then he did some bullshit, so she had him castrated, right? And that's Uranus. Nothing to do with that. Had absolutely no relationship whatsoever with that. And then, there's another one. Where's another? We need another god. What god doesn't have a planet named after him yet? Neptune. Neptune, ruler of the ocean on Earth. When you look at the ocean, you're looking at Neptune. You're looking at the domain of Neptune. That's Neptune's domain. Poseidon, Neptune, same thing, basically. You're going to name a planet after it? What the fuck is wrong with you? And then, there's a rock. There's a rock that for a while we're going to call a planet, and then we're going to decide isn't a planet. What should we call that one? Let's name that one after the god of the dead, brother of Zeus and Neptune, who raped Persephone and caused the seasons to exist. That's what we'll name that, like, oblong, weird rock thing that's smaller than asteroids after. Planetoids, right? So I'm not into it. When astrologers talk about, you're Pluto, I'm like, that's when I tune out. I know it's unusual. Perhaps I'm the only one. I don't know if I'm the only one. But for me, the 7 ancient planets, which includes the moon and the sun, I know they're not planets, but the 7 ancient planets. If you're going to talk about astrology, I'm only vaguely interested in a collective unconscious kind of level when you're talking about ancient astrology. Once you start talking about Uranus and Neptune and Pluto, anyway, Unus. All the natural links of the world remain intact under the transforming action of quote, operative faith, end quote. But a principle, an inward finality, one might almost say an additional soul, is superimposed upon them. Under the influence of our faith, the universe is capable, without outwardly changing its characteristics, of becoming more supple, more fully animate, of being, quote, sur-animated, S-U-R-animated. I think it's a French thing that they just couldn't think of a good way to translate it into English, so they just went ahead and kept it French, because most English is French anyway, so just fucking, I don't know, anglicize it right now, right here in this moment, as we're translating this. End quote. That is the, quote, at the most, end quote, and the, quote, at the least, end quote, of the belief expressly imposed upon us by the gospel. Sometimes this, quote, sur-animation, end quote, expresses itself in miraculous effects. When the transfiguration of causes permits them access to the zone of their, quote, obediential potency, okay, end quote. At other times, that's the I was just following orders power. I don't know, I'm just kidding. At other times, and this is the more unusual case, it is manifested by the integration of unimportant or unfavorable events within a higher plane and within a higher providence. We have already mentioned and analyzed P53, that's page 53, a very typical example of this second form of divinization of the world by faith. Parentheses, a form no less profound and no less precious than more striking prodigies, end quote. I'm curious. Let me just briefly go back. 53a. Is it still 53 or was that? It could be said that providence, for those who believe something check, that is that happened to Job, greater than his first. Job, bonum, provided we lovingly trust him. Whatever. Okay, something about Job. All right. Where was I? I don't know. Yeah, okay. In considering the passivities of diminishment, we saw how our failures, our death, our faults even, could, through God, be recast into something better and transformed in Him. Yeah, okay, I remember that. I remember one of my teachers telling me that, like, when you finally achieve, I don't know, theosis or whatever, that even the horrible mistakes and the evil that you did, all the bad stuff that you encountered along the way is glorified by, il fine giustifica I mezzi. But this is more like the mezzi, the means, is like gets to share in the glory of the ends. So you kill 20 million people in order to create world peace. Yay, the 20 million people and the world peace. I guess like when you have like a plaque of martyrs for the revolution or something, then I guess, yeah, that's kind of like what that is. Yeah. What? The moment has come to envisage this miracle in its most general sense and from the particular point of view of the act of faith, which is, on our part, its providential condition. Well, rather than be a stickler for, we're in the middle of 3.3b2, and we will remain in the middle of 3.3b2 until I believe it'll be Edward picks up where we left off in Teilhard de Chardin, part 24 of Chicken Philosophy. I hope you had fun. I hope the music was good. And also, I wasn't going to do this. I told Piyu I got bit by the chicken philosophy bug. I think I got inspired by, I was watching this interview with CJVX and the way he was talking about kind of his ministry, his, what inspires him, and being a philosopher king, cyberpunk Luddite. Was that right? Was that what he said? An artist and a philosopher king, cyberpunk Luddite, and artist and philosopher was the serious part, and the rest of it is kind of like, pointing to things that ring true, but really artist and philosopher, and how that to him resulted in being a YouTuber. I mean, doing stuff on YouTube, which I can relate with, although I think because, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but like my personality, my age, and whatever else, and the topics I'm into looking at. I'm specifically like looking at what everybody's talking about and then saying, nobody's talking about this except for those old people with the thin ties and the really obnoxious people over there are the only ones talking about this subject. So I'm gonna be like a cool guy-ish. I don't know. I mean, I'm just me, really, but I'm gonna be a little bit more like irreverent and like funny, but talk about the subject that's only being covered by those guys and without an agenda. The only agenda is to delve into, to explore, to increase knowledge of things that aren't useful. I mean, in the general sense, like this isn't. You're not going to like use this at work. You're not going to use You're not going to use Teilhard de Chardin to program your AI bot better. You know what I mean? Or maybe you are. I don't know. That's a scary thought. But yeah. And what was I talking about? The point is, I wasn't going to record one of these until the promotion of my book was over. Because, see, what happened was, I initially, I'm just going to make a mess here. So first, for those who don't know, I published a bunch of short stories, which included stories from the Interdimensional Coffee House, and then I made a sequel, which included more short stories, and some stories like little chapters taken out of the New World Empire, which was the origin of the Interdimensional Coffee House. And then I thought, hey, you know what? Since there's so many of these little like highlights from the New World Empire and the Interdimensional Coffee House, what I should do is take everything else, the whole story, except for the highlights that I put in here, and put it in here, which was really confusing because it's like Swiss cheese because the highlights are missing. Like all the interesting parts of the New World Empire and the Interdimensional Coffee House are specifically only those targeted most interesting 7 chapters of each of those are missing from this book. And so people would read this book and be like, what the fuck? Am I supposed to have read those books? I'm like, yeah, that's what it says in the description on Amazon and in the introduction of this is a companion to these 2 books. Fucking Mrs. Brunk? No, I have nothing but love and sincere respect for Mrs. Brunk. So as a result of all that, I decided, you know what, I'm going to take all 3 of these books and just make them into one book, combine them into one book. And while I'm at it, I'm going to put a bonus 4th section in there. But I felt like it was so personal to me that I didn't want to... And it has all these illustrations that make it damn expensive. It's like $40 on, full color, high res. So it's like $40 to buy. I couldn't make it less than that. I'll make $2 if you buy it. Yeah, Jeff Bezos will make $8, and then the rest of it goes to the printing costs. So I just left it there, paperback only, for 2 years. And then one day, actually what happened was I left my computer in the security, check at the airport, and then I was like, oh no, that has the only copy of the New World Empire and the Interdimensional Coffee House on it. And if I was ever going to make that available on Kindle, now I can't because my laptop is gone forever. And then they found my laptop, and then I got it back. And then I was like, well, you know what? I'm over it. I don't care. People can drag it through the mud, give it 1-star reviews, give it toxic, reviews. I'm over it. Whatever. I just kind of want to make it available for people to download on Kindle. So I did that. I made this available to download on Kindle 2 days ago, as I'm speaking to you now. And then I made it free for 5 days. And then I made a special episode of Chicken Philosophy, letting people know that it's free, and also me, Edward, BT, and Pymander each read our favorite story or chapter or whatever from this book, and we had a little discussion about it, and it was fun. And so I was going to let that be the most recent episode of Chicken Philosophy and just let that hang there for 5 days, from like that makes more sense for the algorithm, so that'll be the video that it recommends to people who watch Chicken Philosophy. Whatever. Then I was watching CJ the X and I just felt like recording, so I did. That's what happened. It's raining now. I'm going to stop recording and enjoy nature and the rain. And you know what? It's Sunday, which means I'm not dieting today, which means I'm going to have fucking pizza. Pizza and Coca-Cola. This episode is brought to you by
Shri Siddhi Vinayak Namo Namaha Ashta Vinayak Namo Namaha Ganapati Bappa Moraya